Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, and as there are quite a lot of cast on crit shenanigans to be done this league, I have moved on to my next project, which is still Cyclone, but it's cast on crit with a two-handed exquisite blade using Blade Vortex and Bladefall. In this case, it is a Pathfinder character, but it can be pretty versatile and most ascendancies could be used, but I'm trying to go for a pretty decent amount of Fizz to early conversion here, and then I picked Pathfinder because it gives really reliable flask charges and flask sustain while giving lots and lots of movement speed, which does make Cyclone feel a lot better. Now the reason for a two-handed exquisite blade is because the shaped versions of these swords do have an additional link of cast on crit level 20, and then also a pretty nice mod of 20% chance to deal double damage. So it gives you a good 6 link if you link it up well enough. It can also have that 20% double damage and the cast on crit saving you an additional link. And then if you meta craft it just right, you can get hits can't be evaded, a bunch of extra spell damage, some good crit, and the base itself has a lot of crit multi. So in this case we end up spinning with a two-handed sword and dealing quite a lot of additional damage, and it does seem to be fairly worth building around at this point. May even do more damage than, let's say, the Fakener I showcased or the Discharge I showcased not too long ago, and it's probably somewhat versatile. The biggest damage gain is going to be from Blade Vortex. Bladefall is there to help a decent amount of clear speed, but we could probably try out a few other things like EK, Glacial Cascade, even Arc if you really wanted to, just for the flavor of the month face roll type of spell setup. But in this case I am choosing to stick to Blade Vortex and Bladefall, and you can see that it's pretty much a machine at clearing, especially these long narrow corridors like a Blade Vortex should be known for. And after playing this character, it does make me kind of wonder why I would ever play regular Blade Vortex ever again, when just slapping it into a cast on crit setup fixes a lot of the problems that many people have had with Blade Vortex, and that's the wind up time and standing still and just winding up the Blade Vortex and not feeling very good about being out of combat with that sort of a playstyle. Whereas this one, you won't really have any Blade Vortex stacks unless you've hit something recently, and then you're just diving straight into the next pack, and it's a very active Cyclone playstyle while still maintaining quite a large amount of stacks if you want. You can grab more duration, you can grab that duration helm enchant, and you can actually maintain 10 stacks pretty reliably. But I find that for the most part, a few stacks of Blade Vortex is just fine. Letting Bladefall do quite a lot of damage is good too. And then on boss fights, you should be maintaining those 10 stacks of Blade Vortex fairly comfortably, as you will be critting it very often and on one stationary enemy. You've also got your Val Blade Vortex and Val Righteous Fire to add a shitload of extra damage during those boss fights, and I think he should end up holding up pretty well in the end game against the true test of Guardians and Uber Elder, though I've not yet quite made it that far. I've only managed to test out one Red Elder, and considering my sword is currently pretty suboptimal, the damage wasn't too bad, and you see that in just a minute. But for most of these encounters, the betrayal stuff, the research for example, this one, you can spin right through most of this shit and deal some immense damage, just about buttering your way through all of it. And the survivability has been probably my biggest challenge here, because I don't currently have any Fortify going up most of the time. It's attached to Leap Slam, but that is a kind of awkward playstyle to try and leap on things and then cyclone them as well. And I really do need my sword to be finished crafting for this build to be as good as it should be, because it needs hits can't be evaded. I've been just ignoring my hit chance altogether up until I get my sword craft, and that means I've got about 80% hit, and my crit is pathetic as well, because as you'll see in a second, I'm using a blue sword at the moment, and that is very, very suboptimal to my end game setup. So once you got the sword crafted, it does become way, way better, or you can go a few different little routes, which I'll show you as well in a sec too. However, the sword crafting, it's a little bit challenging, but it's definitely not unrealistic, and it depends on how good you want your sword to be. but I do think that it should be something attainable if you really want to play this build. And here's the Red Elder. Like I said, I've got about 80% chance to hit, so currently my effective Cyclone crit chance is 60%, meaning my Bladefall is really not going off that often, and maintaining 10 stacks of Blade Vortex can be a bit of a challenge, but the damage is still respectable versus a tier 15 Elder. So we've still got a bit of damage to get, and I think once I get my sword done, the build will of course cost a bit more at that stage, but by God, I think it's going to be one of the smoothest and most enjoyable builds to play for current endgame as well as mapping content. So you can see the damage, not too bad at all, and there's still quite a bit to go. So I'll run through how I made this character so far and what it takes to get it to this stage, and just possibly the other options that you can utilize to make this type of build. So the character is currently level 90 and called Two-Handed CoCSpin because it is entirely based around an exquisite blade, like I said, with these two particular modifiers. So these are the two types of mods you are looking for in your shaped blade, and they require something like level 75, though ideally if you have a level 83 that means you can accidentally craft a good physical sword instead, with, you know, some double damage, physical damage, then you regal it and get some good fizz. So I do go for an 83 just in case I do that, but you need about a level 75 if you just want to craft a good cast on crit one. So getting this type of roll, this entire combination, took me something like 4,000 alterations, and then you can get an imprint beast, regal it, annul it, and once you get that right combo, then you can go for the multi-mod and you can turn it into something quite a bit more special, which I have yet to do, but it would look something like that. So you would have spell damage, crit chance, and hits can't be evaded, and you can see the current difference in my build. So if you're using Cyclone, which I am for the crit chance and the cast on critting, currently with this piece of shit, and no hit chance and no crit, so just like a real bad placeholder sword, I'm rocking 68 effective Cyclone crit. I have 80% chance to hit. If I replace it with the eventual sword that I'm going to have, it's 92% crit, effective crit rate all of a sudden, and the hit chance goes up to 100, so it's going to be much more reliable for proccing Blade Vortex and Bladefall. And you can see that the damage itself is going to go up quite a bit, an average hit of 160k, and currently I have 130. So once I get this next imprint and then the regal, I will show you in the next video when I've obviously successfully killed Uber Elder with this, what a real sword's going to look like and what the build should look like in the full capability of the endgame. However, with just about any sword, you will be clearing content just fine, because when there's lots of monsters around, you're hitting lots of times, you're going to be stacking those Blade Vortexes regardless. You just need a really decent sort of weapon for the pure single target, if you're not going to strictly rely on Val Blade Vortex, for example. So the setup is based around that, and we have Cyclone attached to Blade Vortex, Bladefall, and Cast on Crit. So those are the staples there. You then have increased critical strikes, and Fizz to Lightning. Our last link, when you get it, is probably going to be increased area. At least that's what I've been playing with for the most part. And then subbing in Conk Effect when you want bigger damage. So the entire build is based around the sword, and you get your Blade Vortex and your Bladefall going from 100% Fizz to almost 100% Cold and Lightning, so then you can scale some penetration, some elemental damage, and overall it should be a slightly better increase than if you were pure physical. As well as that, I do have gloves like these, which don't seem to be all that important when factoring in damage, but I am converting my last bit of damage here from cold to lightning. If you leave it unconverted, you're really not losing too much damage, but this is just optimal setup. So you just start out with a pair of fucking whatever gloves, some life, one resist, get the multi-mod happening. But by all means, this is like just fine-tuning to the stupidest degree, because we don't really gain that much damage from that additional little bit of conversion. If you just grab a pair of gloves with life, one resist, an attack speed, and then craft a prefix of, let's say, convert to cold or lightning, you really won't be losing out on much. In the end, after doing this, I think it was kind of a waste of the multi-mod. In any case, I did it, and here we are. I'm then running a Lore Weave just because it actually synergizes quite well with the build. Just about everything there is used except for the physical damage. You do need the crit, the ele damage, the max res, all that sort of shit. But if you really want, since you are using a two-hander, you can shove a combs into the build and lose a few setups here or there for current utility and spells, and we'd go up to 7k life, and that would make things a bit more comfortable. A lot of the damage in the build is coming from the fact that we have a ring that is Elder based, and then you get a Mark of the Shaper, so that adds 100% ele damage. Pretty hard to replace this otherwise, so averaged out for a ring, about 50 ele damage per ring. Not going to be too easy to get that type of damage elsewhere. You do have a Shaper Amulet that does an extra chunk of physical damage as cold. You can get one as extra lightning or extra fire, or even non-chaos as chaos for Elder Amulet. All of that is going to be great, but you try and also get a bit of multi and then craft a life on there. Star Conjure is just there because, we don't really need resists anymore, so you get a bit of life, attack speed, crit, and then you really want a fairly decent pair of movement speed boots, so 30 or 35 movement speed, just so you can run around all the faster, because as a Pathfinder, we are pretty goddamn fast, and when you Cyclone, you want as much movement speed as possible. So besides that, just a belt that we crafted with prismatics and pristines. Actually, I think we didn't even craft this one. We tried to craft one of these. I just bought one in the end for like 60C that looks like this, and crafted a little Pathfinder mod on there as well to help Flask sustain too. The Flask setup otherwise is just Diamond Flask with crit. You're running a Wise Oak, which is of course triple balanced because, I don't know, not that hard to do, I don't think. And then a Silver Flask for the speed. But once I get into boss fights and endgame, I do want to chuck on an Atziri Flask instead, because Atziri Flask is quite a lot of extra damage for these physical to lightning and cold converted type spells, and especially as a Pathfinder, that does make us quite beefier, and as well as that, we do get a good little bit of a leech going there too. So besides that, we got the setups. We have the way that I actually maintain power charges, and that is my 5 link over here. So chucking out Stormbrands, Curse on hit, increase crit strikes, Warlord's Mark, and power charge on crit. So initially I was using Assassin Mark, but Warlord's Mark seems to be a lot better just for our sustain on clearing and endurance charges, leech, all of that. If you can get a Warlord Mark on hit ring instead, that'd be a lot better, but this is just a slightly budget option. And what you do is basically just fire out some Stormbrands. You can do that every now and again yourself, single target. But if you have a brand recall attached to Arcane Surge and increased duration, so brand recall over here, that means that during our playstyle of spinning to win, you just press brand recall whenever you want. That keeps up Arcane Surge, and it also does serve to give you curse on hit all around you, serves to keep up your power charges. So it's actually a pretty nifty little setup during your spinning, which means you don't ever have to stop to do this as long as you have a few brands active against the enemies, and it should help out during boss single targeting as well. And I think it's actually a pretty tidy little setup for the addition of this type of build. I then do lastly want to show the reservation, and I'm currently running Wrath, Blood Rage, and Herald of Ash over here, as well as the War Banner. The War Banner I will drop, it just gives me accuracy at the moment, but I will get rid of the War Banner in favor of a bit more mana once I get my hits can't be evaded craft. But currently it just helps out with my accuracy, because you can see my accuracy is 81% even with the War Banner. Without it, turn it off, and we're rocking 74%. Now if you want to, you can just not focus around the hits can't be evaded at all and actually get some accuracy on your gear, but you'd need it, in certain key slots, and that would make hitting and critting a lot better. But currently I'm planning to go for the hits can't be evaded sword because I think it should be worth it. Either way, we'll end up getting rid of War Banner, and then we just have a good chunk of mana unreserved so that spinning is a bit easier. But currently I'm running Wrath, and you may ask why. Well, because I deal quite a lot of spell damage in the lightning sense, so we do get that 20% more. But these types of Watcher's Eyes with 25 Fizz as extra lightning is almost as good as a Hatred, and they're really quite cheap. This one costs like 20C. They're a completely underutilized Watcher's Eye. If you can get a better Hatred Watcher's Eye, then you're probably better off running Hatred. But besides that, you're just going for a bit of Fizz, attack speed on your jewels, and maybe a resist or two, but jewels aren't super important in this build. Now, the way the passive tree is laid out, it's pretty straightforward. You can't really go wrong. You're just going all the way around and traveling, getting your power charges, your flask charges, your area, your life, and this node over here is how I sustain mana, because we do have a little bit of cyclone damage, so mana leech is sustained through that. You grab acro for a bit of extra defense, but all of your crit is coming from this node here and these nodes here, so make sure you fill out that for your crit, as well as a power charge, and then the crit strike jewel. Now, I did level this character by using Blade Vortex as soon as I could, up until 38, and at 38 I just grabbed a couple of foils, put some crit onto them, and with a tabula you can quite easily maintain a 6-link and start doing this entire cast on crit setup. Just replace this area gem here for the cast on crit in your tabula, and you should be starting to cast on crit quite a lot of shit, and it will be a pretty clean setup if you've got crit wherever you can get it, on your foils, in your passive tree, a couple of diamond rings, some Malagaro gloves, all of that. I think you should be able to level with it quite smoothly. And at level 51 you can grab a Terminus Est like I did as well, which makes you a decent bit of fast, and then you can start mimicking that two-handed playstyle. Now, the sword, like I said, it's going to be a bit tough to craft. There are plenty of them out there and they're fairly overpriced, so you're better off just trying to craft one yourself. If you're going for the absolute best one, this is what you're looking for. If you think it's just a bit too hard to get, then by all means you can skip out on a suffix or two. For example, if you just end up having something like that one and you can't regal and then annul into this exact setup, if you just get rid of the crit, for example, it should still be a pretty good sword. So we're currently sitting at here, our cyclone crit is 92 effectively. If you edit this one out right here and get rid of the crit, for example, we still maintain an 84% effective crit chance. No big deal, no great loss. For the most part, you could either just get away with one sort of craft here, a big spell damage, or the attack speed, or the cast on crit. For basically the entirety of the video that you've seen, I wasn't even using a sword this good. I was simply using one that had cast on crit, and that was it. So it was just a sword with cast on crit, didn't even roll good attack speed on it, and it's still good enough to clear most of the game pretty funnily and pretty comfortably. But if you're going for the min-max and you want the Uber Elder to feel good in the end, I think we're going to need a hits can't be evaded multi-modded sword. For now, guys, I'd say that's all I need to mention about the build. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to have some good news about the end game in the next one. I think it should be pretty good, but we'll have to wait and see for the next stream. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and see you next time.